Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of us talking about blockchain gaming news. I'm Jenny Jordan, and with me is John Jordan as ever. I believe it is Halloween, so happy Halloween, whatever that is. And it's Friday, the 31st of October, and let's go straight into the news of the week. So, Wemade Legend of Ymir, I think that's how you say it, has launched this week on Wemix, the Web3 games platform. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Wemade is sort of very well known South Korean game developer, like a lot of South Korean companies floated on the stock exchange. So sort of a really well robust company. Got onto blockchain pretty early with its Mir 4 MMORPG. So it's sort of like a lot of Korean companies. They like a core of their business is these massive multiplayer role playing games that started off PC and now obviously sort of cross platform, now PC mobile. So they're very grindy. These South Korean games are extremely grindy, but people throw a lot of time at them. They sort of is that situation where they sort of live in them. So you can't really play one of them. You can only play one of them at a time. So it's quite a competitive market. A lot of these things are launching all the time from different companies, NCSoft and Nexon, and other big companies in that space. What's interesting about Wemade is it got to blockchain quite early. It was the first South Korean company to sort of announced it was doing stuff, although obviously the stuff it was doing was quite limited at the time. And then lots of other South Korean companies got involved, and then lots of them have sort of had, to say it politely, have sort of experimented in lots of different strategies of how they're going to do blockchain. So some of them, even Wemix, tried a lot of casual mobile stuff, and it's all sort of cycling through and trying to find a way of doing it. But Wemade, I think, had a big, as you were sort of the expert on this when you were doing the big blockchain game list. It had like over 100 games it said were blockchain enabled, and a lot of them were mobile games with like a very lightweight integration. It just didn't work, and they basically pulled all that, and they've gone back to focusing really over the last year on these very big MMORPGs. And increasingly, as new ones come out, they have sort of better integration. So Ymir 4 was sort of quite lightweight. I didn't play that one, and then it had a few other ones. Was it about a year and a half ago? It was Night Crows, and that had a sort of interesting integration with various sort of tokens, and it sort of had a sort of quite weird tokenomics thing that the main token could only be minted if it was above a certain price, and I'm not sure that worked out. But anyway, you could mint your characters as NFT. So it was sort of an interesting first approach. And then they've done a few other games working with South Korean developers who have taken Web 2 games and put Web 3 in there. So there's one earlier this week called when was it? About two months ago, called ROM Golden Age. That was a sort of reworking. And Legend of Ymir is sort of their next big one from Wemix itself. And it has, we don't know if it's going to work, but it has a much sort of simpler integration. So there's the Wemix token, which is their sort of platform token, which is quite well held in South Korea in particular, and on sort of exchanges and stuff. And they have a version of that called G-Mix, which is a sort of you can think of it as a synthetic version, but it's a one-to-one sort of price thing. But it's sort of, I'm not sure if it's on-chain, but you can sort of earn it in the game, and you can spend it to upgrade your character and items, which is sort of the key thing in these RPGs. And there's a certain amount in each server. So with these MMORPGs, they basically fill up via servers. So, you have servers, obviously I'm playing the game in the server in sort of Europe, and there's servers in Asia and servers in North America. And there's a certain number of people can play in those servers at any one time. So you sort of pick a server, and all your activity happens on that server. You can't fight people in other servers, blah, blah, blah. So there's a certain amount of, the idea is there's going to be a certain amount of sort of value in each server. That's going to be based around the amount of in-app purchases being spent in that server. And then, that's how much people can extract from that server. So it's sort of a good way of sort of limiting it. So it's not like people can extract all the value. They can extract a certain percentage of the value that's being spent in there. So that's quite an interesting way. There's other sort of things as well. Yeah, they've auctioned 10 servers. So a bit, I guess, like guilds could maybe own these, or individuals if you're rich enough. But you can own your own server, and then obviously you have certain control over what goes on in that. You can set up certain events. Obviously, it's you can't just do whatever you want. You can't just ban people from the game, but within your server, you have a certain amount of control, and also you can earn passive income from that as well. And they're saying up to 15% of the economic activity in that server. Obviously, the point is, if you have a really popular server with loads of people spending stuff, then you want to reward people for doing that. And there's actually another token, another crypto token that sort of deals with that B2B side of things, and that's what you have to, if you want to buy one of these servers, you have to use this token as the auction thing as well. And they have another thing they're doing with streamers as well, so the server for streamers. So what's interesting is not so much the game, although it's if you're into those things, it's a big Unreal 5, which is the sort of top technology people use, and it's all of sort of Norse mythology, so Ragnarok and all that sort of stuff. I've been playing it. It's one of these sort of idle-ish games, so you can play a lot of it on auto, although they have tried to have more direct control in this one. It's a bit more combat focused than Nightcrows. Nightcrows, you could sort of just play it auto, which I'm still playing it, whereas this one seems a little bit more, there's certain situations where it makes sense for you to sort of jump in and be a bit more active rather than letting the AI handle it. But it's, I've only been playing it, I don't know, 10 hours or something, just sort of in the background. And it's sort of quite nice. I don't know how long I'll be playing both of them, because then you're sort of... I'm not really spending any money. I spent a bit of money in Nightcrows, maybe like $50 just to sort of get a feel for how it works. I've not spent anything in Legend of Ymir yet. So you sort of basically at some point have to choose which one you're going to go with. But for people who've played Nightcrows, a lot of the sort of features and structure are very similar. I think they're sort of better. They've learned nothing with the blockchain. They've learned from just the UI of running those other, every game they put out, they sort of learn more how to, because these games are extremely complicated in terms of all the different structures and all the different things you're leveling up. And someone like me sort of, I can, right, this is how I level up my gear. And then there'll be some other whole elemental thing that will come in at a certain point that you level up to do something else with your gear and take it to, it's a horrible mess. And I, wouldn't say I'm an expert in any of these things.
No, probably not help by having six different tokens and layers of how to integrate blockchain.
Well, I have to be honest, with Nightcrows, I didn't interact with any of the blockchain stuff at all, partly because you couldn't really do anything. I think until you got to level 45, then you could start doing the token stuff. And then you had to get level 50 to mint out your character. But when I last looked at it, you basically had to use the in-app purchase currency to mint your character, and that was $100 to mint out your character. And there was no secondary market, so you were basically just minting out your character for the benefit of minting out your character, who admittedly you had craft, you may have some affection with that character because you chose the character class and all that sort of stuff, and there's a certain amount of customization you can do on them, but it's just a digital asset that is on the Wemix Wemix platform, and it's not clear how you can do anything else with it. So but I do think what's interesting about Wemix is everyone makes mistakes all the time, and it was quite clear quite early on. I think we thought that them sticking all these tokens into casual games was just like a crazy thing to do. It took them a bit of time to sort of retrench around that strategy. But this strategy, I'm not saying it's sort of super working, but it seems that this sort of mainly Web 2 game with some Web 3 stuff in it is not impacting the Web 3 people. So these games are not lacking player base. So I think that Nightcrows, I think they're saying it's running about $200 million a year in the economy. So fairly sizable. You should know it could be profitable on that sort of level. So it's not like the Web 2 people aren't playing these games because there's some Web 3. It's not clear how much the Web 3 is sort of helping in terms of revenue or sort of retention of these players, because the blockchain stuff really kicks into these games. When you are playing 10 hours a day and you are spending $100 a month and you are getting these very rare items. So in Legend of Ymir, again, there is it doesn't actually involve the token, I think, but there is a loop where you can basically craft these legendary NFT items and then obviously sell them in your I think it's just in your server again, but you basically mint NFTs and then as items, gear, and then you can sell those as well. So there is a bit more of a sort of straightforward economy in there. Again, it takes take a few months to get an idea about whether this is working, but it seems to be okay. It's always a good sign when these games launch and you can't immediately log into your server. So we've been logging in for the last couple of days and you end up in a queue because the server's just full. He says the server is full and it literally puts you in a queue and it says you're number 297. I mean, it doesn't take that long. Yeah, it takes, maybe you just stay in the queue for 15 minutes and you get in the end. But that's sort of a good sign that people are playing the game. So
yeah, that's right. Right, let's talk about Cambria then, a very different sort of Web3 game deployed on Ronin that recently having successful NFT sale, which they raised, I think, 1.3 million through. And following that, this week they announced they have raised 2 million from Bitkraft and Sky Mavis and a lot of sort of angel investors, KOLs, and the lot. So, talk us through, Cambria. I don't think we've talked about that before, really, in any depth.
No, not very much. No, I mean, I've not played it. So it was one of the first games that I think. I mean, I can't say definitively, but certainly the first implementation of it was called Degen Arena. So that was the first time. Obviously, the term degen has been used a lot in crypto. But this is the first time I sort of heard in a game, sort of a proper-ish game, people using the term degen as a sort of marketing term, like it's a degen game, come and get involved. So they actually have now renamed it. I can't remember what they call it. It's something else arena. Anyway, they took the degen out of it. But they were very sort of early to this sort of. They in fact call it themselves now risk to earn model, because everyone has to be something to earn. But it's what we've talked about pretty much every week for the last few months, about there being this sort of way of having some sort of game system that is sort of encapsulating a gambling element, where you're sort of you're wagering, and in the case of Degen Arena, it was a PvP sort of arena. So you basically, I'm putting in some crypto, you're putting in some crypto, winner gets, there's a rake for the developer, and winner takes the sort of, whatever, almost 50%, almost double their money. So that was pretty popular. I think that was even in 2024. So that was sort of when blockchain gaming, there was a bit of life to it. But they've done, I've seen the numbers, there's actually quite a big detailed June analytics page on all their stuff. And that original game, which is sort of very sort of a simple mode sort of thing, it's done about $145 million worth of ETH has been wagered. I mean, like an enormous sum of money. And obviously, their fee from that is quite small, because it's mainly going back to the players. But it really encapsulated that, sort of crypto gambling element. And because that was successful, they then sort of decided they were going to, not decided, but because that was successful, they could then build probably what they wanted to build, which was a more MMORPG. It's a very pixelated sort of MMORPG, and they decided they were going to do that on Ronin. They were sort of, when Ronin was talking about being the next gaming blockchain and all that sort of stuff, they were one of the games that was in that. So at the moment, they have this sort of Degen Arena thing, which I think is still live. And then the main Cambrian game, they've done these sort of seasons. So they've done season 1, season 2, and then season 3 is happening, I think, in November, which is why we're having this announcement. As I say, I don't really follow this one super closely. People are saying there's going to be a token after maybe season 3, so this is probably why this funding has been announced. As you said, they already have 2 NFT collections. They just did their islands, mint 3,333 NFTs, which is like their land sale basically. And they raised like 1.3 million. It obviously depends on the price of ETH at the time, and the price of those islands has sort of gone up 50% since. So it's like a lot of these games. I mean, there are sort of similar ones. A Gigaverse is sort of painting with a very broad brush, sort of these pixelated MMORPG dungeon-based sort of crafting combat games. There's a few of them out there, and Cambria was sort of the first one. And I think they have decent audiences. I guess they have sort of in the sort of thousands of players. Maybe probably the issue with them is they're probably all sort of attracting the same 10,000 sort of players. I would imagine. Yeah. So there is a little bit of cannibalization, I guess, between those two games. But it's obviously if you're raising 2 million, you're not getting people are believing in your model, and Bitkraft were part of the original funding round that they announced. I think it was about I can't remember, just over $1 million, I think, a year or so ago. So obviously they still believe in it. Sky Mavis, obviously.
I think went they on Arbitrum then, and then they migrated to Ronin.
Yeah, you're probably right, actually. Yeah, and obviously Sky Mavis are sort of desperate to have any sort of games on their blockchain, because everything's going to Abstract at the moment because Abstract's where all people expect the big airdrops to happening. So that's why Gigaverse is doing very well, partly because it's on Abstract. But it does sort of show again that the games that have survived have tended to be, these sort of classic type games, RPG, pixel, dungeons, combat, risk, reward, sort of degen sort of elements. And they're again a very small team. I think they're like 10 people. So if you raise 2 million, depending on your salary base, that can last you a long time. So it sort of does show, while there's lots of tumbleweed across most of sort of blockchain gaming, if you have a certain amount of belief and there is sort of interest in a certain sort of game at the moment from sort of what we might call retail players, people who are prepared to spend money in crypto, those are always there. So you have to take that as a sort of sign of where the sector is at the moment.
Good. Right, in completely different news, Mythical Games did announce this week that the Mythos blockchain is launching an L3 on World Chain. So we spoke about this a few weeks back. Or was it last week? Even? We didn't quite know because it hadn't been sort of confirmed. Now we know a little bit more. So do reveal some more details about this.
Yeah. So as you said, I think it was 2 weeks ago, this tiny little company in America sort of announced they were investing in Mythos because they had a tie-up with WorldCoin, the Sam Altman sort of adjacent sort of human ID system. So famous for the big orbs where they scan your iris and verify you as human. So there's been what we used to call World. So WorldCoin is now, the company's now called World, which is sort of one of those slightly sort of confusing universal terms. So World, the coin is now, people still call it WorldCoin, but they have a token, obviously. And that's what you earn if you have your iris scanned. Although through they have a mobile app, you can actually just get verified using your passport or whatever, like a normal KYC. So you don't get so much WorldCoin if you do that, but you get like $20 or something. I can't remember. But the World so the World project is sort of on a bit of a push at the moment. So they have this app, which was sort of like a wallet app, but not useful for much else. But now they're starting to put like mini app. They call them the mini apps. I don't know exactly what that term is, but they're starting to put sort of apps in there. So actually, nothing to do with this Mythos thing, but Polymarket, the prediction market, has just launched a mini version of its prediction market within the World app, mobile app. Like with all these sort of things, though, the problem is sort of you don't want to limit your user base to people who've been verified through World app because they say 17 million, but how many of those are active? And obviously, a lot of people in Africa did it to get the money, but whatever it was, that token's been quite valuable at a certain point. So you can't rely on that as a user base. So I think what they've done with Polymarket is there's a few markets that you have to be verified to get involved with, but most of it you don't. And it's a similar thing with this Mythos situation as well. So we knew there was some sort of integration happening. And Mythos is, a parachain on Polkadot. They've made a big play on this over the last sort of year or so that, they were choosing which blockchain to go to, and they chose Polkadot, and Polkadot was the best, and Polkadot's really undervalued and all this sort of stuff. Which technically may or may not be the case, but we don't really see at the moment any sort of large momentum towards Polkadot. It's sort of, if anything, it's the other way around. But anyway, Mythos sort of moved everything over to Polkadot. Polkadot is not very EVM compatible, although there are some ways to do it. So the World Chain thing is obviously the headline stuff is Mythos is integrating this human verified system. So that's a way of dealing with bots. Obviously, there's other ways of dealing with bots. There's other sort of human verification systems. But there's a flashy headline around World because obviously World is this sort of Sam Altman sort of project. So I'm not really sure how important it is for Mythos has loads of bots and it's going to be using World ID to get rid of bots and make sure only verified humans play Pudgy Party. Clearly, that's not going to be the case because there's not that many people playing it. But John Linden, the CEO, was on Twitter was sort of saying, this is the sort of first step of all these other announcements we're going to be making. And he was particularly talking up the fact that Mythos is launching this, as you say, this L3 on World Chain, which is a Ethereum-based L2. and this will give them sort of EVM compatibility. As I say, there are ways you could do it directly sort of on Polkadot, but they're a bit sort of maybe more clunky. When I first got the press release through, it wasn't very clear to me that Mythos wasn't going to come off Polkadot entirely and go to this world chain. Now, clearly that's not the case. I did, in fact, even ask the PR, what does this mean? But the PR is obviously not a crypto person, didn't understand my question. So we just assumed this is a bit of a PR headline thing. But having this connected, integrated, proper EVM L3 might give them some other interesting functionality further down the line, maybe to do with NFTs or stuff like that. But I mean, remember back in the day, that before it was the Mythos chain, it was just the Mythical's own blockchain. They did do their own Ethereum integration, because you could port your Blanco's NFTs over to Ethereum, and I still own some Ethereum-based Blanco's NFTs. So it's not that they haven't done it in the past, but clearly still EVM is where the majority of stuff like liquidity and developer sort of activity happens. So to be just on Polkadot itself, it's sort of fine, but you're missing other stuff. So maybe we'll sort of see again. And we still know that Mythical as a company is going to announce its Series D at some point, which we still haven't. We thought that was going to happen a bit sooner, but so I guess it's all going to be rolled up in this big thing that Mythical is going to be pushing. And Mythical has it is a company who's been in blockchain since the get-go. Is still supposedly worth $1 billion, probably worth more than $1 billion now, given crypto at a high level had the sentiment around that. Is it big enough to IPO? Probably not, but it is one of the handful of sort of big infrastructure players that sort of weathered the storm. So it'll be interesting to see what they come with.
I think they announced about 2 years ago when they did go to Polkadot, and it was a little bit puzzling at the time, like why on earth are they doing that? But they also announced then that they were raising, was it around 20 million or so? So there clearly was a lot more money around at the time, and maybe that was sort of kept them going at the time, and then they had to do that.
Yeah, no, I think so.
Realizing then that they lost that EVM compatibility that was quite essential actually, and now they are finding a way to sort of a way back to that.
Well, I think you're right. If you're running, I mean, they're a big business. I don't know how many people they have, but it would be hundreds, mainly in North America. That's not cheap. They're running a lot of sort of biz dev type services, which you can't sort of replace with AI, because you're dealing with people and this that's a sort of sales sort of job, and they're dealing with big infrastructure, not just making a few games. They're working with other developers and funding some of them, and it's a big sort of project. And in easy times you can raise a lot of money, but in hard times you sort of have to take the money where you can get the money, and that's the same for a lot of blockchain projects, that you sort of have to they end up making sort of what look like weird decisions at the time, and in a sense they are weird decisions, but it's like, well, we need to do this to not go bust. So there's these blockchain commentators might think this is a weird decision, but it's that or go bust. So I don't know if that was the case with Mythical, but and if you just keep going, obviously you can make you can sort of zigzag your what your vision is, and quite the path you take to get there is the operational part of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yuga Labs has announced that their kind of open world, always on metaverse Otherside is officially launching. I don't know if this is sort of a long anticipated thing, maybe a bit too long, so it's actually people have lost interest or momentum is sort of gone actually quite a while back. But hadn't they announced that this would launch in June of 2025, I think, first? Anyway, it's launching now on the 12th of November. That's the latest they've said anyway. So we'll see if that comes out then. But anyway, so talk a little bit about Yuga and Otherside and that. Yeah,
as you said, I think we thought this would happen a little bit earlier in the summer. They did launch some sort of game. So there was like a bathroom, what's it called, bathroom bash or something, bathroom blitz shooter game, and they did another sort of a play game, sort of TIG game as well. But they've been working on the infrastructure, obviously for a few years, and now they're going to have the first sort of permanent thing going live. I think they're calling it Koda Nexus. So it's more like a sort of social hub that other things will start to sort of build off of. So, but it'll be permanently on sort of space. I imagine there'll be a few articles saying there's no one in the Nexus hub. There's only 20 people in there, or all that sort of stuff. Just because you have something permanently, persistently live doesn't mean people sort of come into it. But they're gonna. It sounds like they're gonna start now to allow people. So the whole thing of the other side, if you remember back in the day when they were launching these NFTs, there is a land component. So it seems like if you can just, you don't need any blockchain. You can just log into it as a sort of browser-based social space. But if you do have some of these NFTs, it looks like you can connect a wallet and then sort of connect those to your account, and then they, you'll start seeing stuff like maybe they're not calling it mining, but there's these resources. Each land gives up a certain sort of level of resources. So it looks like that will start kicking off. There's these coders, which are these little sort of avatar type characters. I'm not sure whether I don't think you control them. Like you have an avatar that you control in other side, but there's these coders which will go off and do things, I think, as well. And they were more rare. So they're going to start to sort of kickstart this sort of resource-based sort of system. Again, as you say, it's with a lot of this metaverse stuff and a lot of the, Yuga was at the peak of, they raised $450 million. And so what have we seen since? They got massively high on their own supply. They just too many complicated NFT projects. They bought a whole bunch of NFT projects into Yuga. They've since sort of sold them off because they just want to focus on sort of apes. They're doing a bunch of stuff with apes. I mean, they announced they're launching a real life sort of club in Miami. They're building that at the moment and various other things. They actually got I think it's still on at the moment with Amazon. You can buy. They got this avatar. I don't know if it's an NFT or not. It's not very clear. I don't think it is. But it's like $60, and it's this sort of Boxius they call it, and it's like a sort of robot mech made out of boxes, like Amazon boxes, I suppose that's the thing. And that's I don't think tons of people are going to be buying that, but that's like an avatar. And you can see with this other side, they have a whole bunch of NFT stuff already that they sort of pre-sold over the last few years, and then they'll have some just non-NFT stuff there, and they'll try and build up a bit of a buzz around it. I think it will be hard, as we've discussed, sort of similar situation really with the sort of the sandbox. I mean, the sandbox is sort of a bit harder because there's more cutesy, and whereas Bored Apes I think still does have a cachet that it's sort of a cool urban brand, and they have done do merch and all that sort of stuff. So they have a certain cachet around it. I don't think it's mass market, but I mean, for them they have so much money that they basically, I mean, obviously you can waste it, but it's hard, I think, for them. They can take a very long term sort of view on this sort of stuff, and quite where it ends up.
What's the big change actually for that's been sort of emerging over the years is it started out wanting to be very exclusive. We are going to be this sort of very small exclusive club for NFT holders, and a lot of things were more kind of, it was NFT gated, and it was a lot more niche, whereas they've sort of realized that that's not a sustainable way forward, and now they've opened up the ecosystem and talking much more about it as a sort of inclusive thing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but I think the other thing was, I can understand if I was, the Yuga people were just like, the board, they were a bunch of 5 guys who were obviously smart and into sort of, urban fashion and all this sort of stuff, and came up with these NFTs when everyone was doing NFTs, made a ton of money. People get given the money to make more NFTs. So they said, we'll make more NFTs. So they just went down the rabbit hole of, I won't go into it all, but I can remember the other side mint and how frantic everyone was, and people were paying like 1 ETH for gas to get into the mint. I mean, it was, absolutely insane. I wrote one of my more mad Substacks about it. We would just, to a degree, the whole industry was sort of like high on that supply of just like, these NFTs are going to be, everything's going to be worth, tons and tons and tons. So we just want more NFTs. But clearly you need that sort of bubble. People sort of argue you need that sort of bubble mentality to get stuff built, or sort of build sort of some sort of culture. But then it takes a long time for that culture to, that sort of after that bubble has popped or that culture is sort of like, changed, then at some point you need, even Yuga at some point need to have revenue. So when people are prepared to buy NFTs on the value that everything's going to go up, that's one business model that lasts for a certain period of time and you can make a ton of money off it. But at a certain point, when people realise like these things, it's not like, it's not like a Bored Ape has gone to zero. Everyone's like, some people are like, NFTs are dead now. A Bored Ape is still worth 5 ETH or whatever that is, like $20,000, but that's not $200,000 like it was. But they still, most people off the streets are not going to be spending $20,000 on a Bored Ape. So to some degree, there is something there, but now they have to actually do the hard yards of operating a business where we have these people, we're paying their salaries, and they have to be doing something, and maybe that could be selling hoodies. That's fine. Maybe that could be running a bar in Miami for crypto bros. All those things you can make money off of, but you have to actually do those hard yards now. And that's I think that original team were they were obviously smart, intelligent people, but I don't know how much business sort of savviness they had. And obviously they've cycled through a lot of CEOs and cycled the people in that team, some of them have sort of had health issues, and so there's been a lot of sort of operational sort of dysfunction. But now, I'm not saying Otherside's going to be a great success. It probably won't be, but they have to have something they can sort of build around. And maybe in 10 years' time, if you do the work, the Bored Apes will be back to where they were. I mean, it's sort of CryptoPunks, as a bit of a purer sort of project, in the sense they were just sort of created as a laugh and given away for free, and they're not back to quite where they were, but they are. CryptoPunks have sort of taken back the throne of being the if you were going to invest in one NFT sort of PFP sort of thing, you would get CryptoPunk. Because at one point it was Bored Apes with a thing. But yeah.
Yeah. Finally, then, let's look at Pixels, which has announced an airdrop in conjunction with Chapter 3 and some new kind of social competitions around that. So you've been talking to Luke Borkowski actually this week. Am I allowed to say that? An interview coming out. So tell us what you are allowed to tell us, I suppose.
Yeah, no, there's nothing under embargo. I won't go into in too much detail because we'll talk a lot more about it next week when the podcast goes live. But you say, there wasn't an airdrop, but Pixels has launched its Chapter 3. It's not a massive big change. What is interesting in terms of sort of what players are doing is they have this new system, like a new system called unions, and it's Luke was saying they have guilds, and guilds are being sort of broadly successful, but guilds are quite a high what's the term? Quite a socially heavy sort of relationship. So guilds are typically you have to apply to get into them, and someone has to sort of agree for you to be in it. And then once you're in a guild, you're expected to do stuff. It's not just I joined a guild and if you don't do anything, you get kicked out. So there's quite a lot of sort of social friction around that. So they wanted to come up with something lighter. So they have this thing called unions, and basically there's 3 unions in the game. You just choose one. They're random, although they have some aesthetic sort of theme around each one. You choose one. And then an event happens, and basically you do tasks in that event. You earn these resources, and then you either donate your resources to your union, or you then sort of donate your resources to a rival union, which actually sabotages them. So basically, all these unions, it's just like filling up filling up a lever, a meter of 100% resource, and I can either give I'm making up that. I can either give 1% to increase my guild, or I can knock one of my rivals down by 1%. So that's very, very simple. It's a sort of time limited thing. It starts, and then the first union to get to 100% basically wins. It's not a massive prize. It's $10,000 worth. It's distributed, depending on how you play. So just a way of getting some light competition in there, and this feeds in to much more. What Luke's always been talking about is sort of segmenting your audience and finding out if you give someone $10 of in-game currency, do they spend that to get better in the game, or do they run off to Binance and sell it? And just they're constant. He's saying that really over the last year they're just investing in data scientists and getting tighter and tighter segmentation around how they can find these people and how they can build out a reward system that just and in some cases it's you might have different rewards for different types of people. So even people who might want to sell something off, you might want to give them something they can't sell, but will keep them going in the game. So they have this. They use this app token stuff as well, which I don't think they really sort of integrated yet and educate people around. But Pixels is sort of the experimentation place where they are sort of feeding in these rewards. And he's very ambitious. But he's not ambitious for Pixels as a game. He's ambitious to build this reward system, and you can plug in Web 2 stuff. He said it was interesting, actually, that giving away crypto rewards, they found has not worked terribly well for people, whereas giving away Amazon vouchers has sort of worked better. Obviously, it depends a little bit on how you're sourcing your audience and stuff. But he's saying we just basically they built like a massive ad network, effectively reward network that happens to have some crypto stuff in it. But any game can plug it in, and they're going to be opening that out to other developers. And we'll actually, obviously a CEO would say we built this incredibly powerful sort of thing, and it works for us. Quite how universal it will be outside of sort of these Web3 games that are already in the Pixel ecosystem, we'll wait and see. But it was good. He was very, he looks always, very, sort of thoughtful and, I wouldn't say he's outspoken, but he's very honest, I think, as well, as honest as someone can be in that sort of situation. Yeah. So I always like talking to him. I think he's the fourth time he's been on the podcast. I think it's the most I've ever had anyone on. So it was all quite done at short notice with this launch. And actually, I should say one more thing. They do have they have lots of stuff going behind the scenes as well, but they're also launching this mobile app called Chubkins, I think it's called, which is like a shared Tamagotchi. Again, it's totally Web 2, but has some Web 3 sort of reward system in it. So it's a nice little sort of cutesy thing, and the whole point is that two people like me and you could have a Chubkin that we have to keep. So it's quite fun. It's only available in the US Android store at the moment, so I don't know how quickly they're going to roll it out. But obviously they're just trying different things, and they have some other things we'll talk about next week in the podcast. So, yeah, good.
I look forward to that then. On that note, we are going to finish off, but thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you all back next week. Bye-bye.